Hey friends. It's another one of those beautiful lakeside mornings. There's something that I alluded to it in yesterday's post, but I didn't want to get into it because it was gonna make my post much too long. But I have had an experience up here in this place, Crystal Lake. I've had this experience a number of times, and it loosely, I could sort of describe it as the lake is trying to tell me who I am. Not in a forceful way, but in a way that reveals who I am and what I'm about to myself. And there's a hilarious I got a kind of a hilarious confirmation of this or like literal depiction of this. Last year, we had a family event, a family storytelling event with the extended family. Because a lot of my family have been coming up here for a long time. A lot of us still stay in touch. We live relatively, in decent proximity to each other. So we had this big storytelling event, and one of my cousins got up and talked about how he sort of orchestrated a boxing match between his young sister and another cousin when they were like 12 or 8. They were kids. And it's kind of a hilarious story. And long story short, my cousin kind of sucker punched my other cousin and then had to run away and hide. But he told this whole story. The guy who was telling the story told the whole thing it's like watching a movie about young kids. It was really, really just a well-told story and pretty funny, And that guy became a boxing promoter later when he grew up. And it was like, I just found that a hilarious and very one-to-one example of this phenomenon, of this place. I don't know if it's the place that's telling you, or if it's like you start to just align in some way with a deeper sense of yourself. But I've had this place communicate with me a number of times and kind of tell me, why don't you go this way? Why don't you nudge yourself in this direction? And that's just been, it's something that, because it's been coming up recently, because I've recently, as I've mentioned in this post, I've been kind of like looking for my next step. I'm in a bit of a phase. I forget what David Deida calls it, but in his book Way of the Superior Man, he definitely very specifically describes the phase of waiting, essentially. Not waiting passively, but waiting in active consciousness for the next thing to present itself. Sometimes you can't just decide to do something, because that decision might represent movement in the direction of a distraction. And so I've been taking that to heart recently, and then coming up here, every time I get here, it's like, oh, it's like this place kind of starts stripping away parts of me that I don't need, and not necessarily giving me the next thing, but making space, creating a space for that next thing to arise. And when I think about, or I don't have the answer yet, but I would say I have memories of being up here, and oftentimes I have a couple of interesting memories where I am not drinking any alcohol, because when you come up here in the summers, you're out at campfires or parties or bars or whatever. For a lot of my life, I would come up, and I was never a big drinker, but I was definitely not a teetotaler. But I have a couple of distinct memories over the years where, for whatever reason, I would decide for one night or for a week or two or whatever that I'm just not going to have any alcohol. And in those times, I became massively empowered. I would just be conscious of my core, and I could be out with people, I could be out at a campfire at night or whatever, not drinking, and be in real service to the group. And so I have at least 2 or 3 memories up here. I also have another memory similar to that didn't happen here, but all that kind of started to come up for me over the last day or 2 or 3. I've kind of had this sense of like, oh right, that's a thing that always happens here. I almost have to remember, I have to be reminded of it when I get up here. I have to be reminded that that's how it works, and that I need to be listening on that level, because it'd be real easy to not listen, to just kind of miss the messages if I don't even know they're coming. But I started kind of tapping in, and these memories started coming back, and I started just connecting. And the interesting thing is, in some weird way, that felt like my work. In some strange way, that felt like this is who I really am. And it goes beyond, it takes me out of my, what I've talked a little bit about on this post, my kind of creative identity loop, where I can get stuck needing to fulfill a certain kind of creative identity, needing to be affirmed or validated for that, in a way that actually, ironically, makes me less creative and makes me much more compulsive as opposed to conscious, because I'm not really being creative. I'm not really living from a creative place. I'm sort of like trapped in an identity that I've got to make the outcomes of whatever I'm doing result in this affirmation of identity or whatever. I know I've talked about this a little bit on some posts a while back. I don't want to go too much into it here, but it's definitely something that I've wrestled with. And coming up here, I've watched my both my memory and then also my conscious kind of like experience reminding me that there's something else really deep that I've come across here, and that I've seen in myself here. And I'm like, okay, let's follow that. Let's see where that goes. As you can tell, I don't know even how to define it yet. It's hard to kind of, I'm a sober person in service of the group. Now, I think that sobriety is maybe more of a key for me, and it's also not like I don't think that I'm standing in relation to alcohol in that moment. I'm standing in relation to other people from a place of strength and from a place of centeredness. For me, it was significant to get alcohol off the table. It was like that little weakening of my system or suppression of my consciousness just made me no longer who I am. And again, I never felt like I was a very big drinker. I would go a long time without. I never really craved it. I would usually drink pretty moderately. But it was enough, when you have a sensitive system, a little bit is enough to just kind of incapacitate you. So I'm kind of listening for that now. Now I'm sort of going, well, what are we really doing? What are we really... What is this trying to tell me? What kind of... What does this mean? What is this service? There's a state, there's a kind of emotional state and a psychological state or place that feels right, feels intuitive. But beyond that, there's a lot of pieces to put together. So, yeah, I'm tracking this for myself. I'm clocking it for myself. I'm hoping to create a conscious connection here and to sort of use this time, because I have a fair amount of time left up here, use this time to really settle into that kind of listening. So that's where I am, folks. Kind of feels like a half open door, or a fully open door, but I'm still kind of surveying it. But because I know the potential is here, I'm kind of excited. I'm just like, what if I took this really seriously? What if I actually listened? Could be good. Thanks for tuning in. I appreciate you. Have a wonderful day. I'll see you very soon.